Hi, Director Brown.
I'm on mute. There we go. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You must have one of those standing desks.
I sure do. Yep. Stand all the time.
Yes. Hey, Serenity, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Serenity. I introduced myself briefly at the meeting, but I'm Zach.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. I would have talked more, but I didn't realize until after the minutes went out that you're also on the subcommittee.
No worries. No worries. I have a meaning to forward you an email I sent to Tiffany when we, reassigned committees in January or February that I won't be at the July one.
Okay.
So just in case I never get around to remembering to forward the email, I will
It's
not
noted.
be at the July one.
Perfect.
I used to work at the city in a previous life and was assigned to law enforcement. So I don't know if you overlap at all with Chris Schoonover,
Oh, yeah.
who was working with us and then moved over to your all's office for a little bit. I don't even know if he's still there. I haven't talked to him since I left in 18.
Schoon is still here and going strong.
I'm loving like his third career.
Yeah, exactly. What do you do now?
I run a research division for the University of Kentucky.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wells.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? How's everybody doing?
Doing well, Mr. Wells. Good afternoon, Phil.
Hey, Phil.
How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm jumping onto my cell phone instead of my laptop because my laptop is saying that I have to update Teams, and I probably won't be on for another 10, 15 minutes if I let my laptop do that.
So I think Whit had indicated he was available, so maybe we'll give it just another second or two. And is Abdul still? I forget. I'm sorry. Is Abdul?
He's not
still
on this committee.
I thought it said it in the minutes, but I thought he'd taken himself off.
Yeah.
Okay, so Whit's the only other person. We'll just give it a second, and then if not, we'll just get going.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm not seeing him, but maybe he'll jump on a little later. We can go ahead and get started. This is actually the first one that I've been able to do. So Director Brown, are we supposed to do any Robert's Rules of Order stuff for subcommittee things, or can we just go? Like, do we have to?
You can just go. It's
Excellent.
being recorded, so.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And as I understand, just so I know for future, the minimum is we have to have 3 members of the subcommittee to meet. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Well, thank you guys so much for making the time. I'm especially grateful for us doing this special meeting since I know it wasn't originally scheduled, but I think it's going to be, otherwise I worried that we were going to lose all of our momentum, and then our next meeting isn't until July. First, I'm honored to be serving with you all. I know all of you have been on the committee before me, so really I'm just here to learn from you all and just support in any way I can as we continue to build all the work that you did. Kennedy was kind enough to kind of update me on what he did as chair previously. But I would also love to hear y'all's thoughts on projects that are still need to be done, things that you want to continue doing from previous times, and moving on. And just to summarize my understanding of what Kennedy told me and what I could find from previous documents, it seems like 3 areas of focus after you all were able to kind of get away from some of the things that ultimately are not within the purview of the committee were the flock cameras, gun violence, and community relations. You know, Flock obviously continues to be in the news. They just re-upped the contract. There's going to be, I think, at least 25 new Flock cameras, assuming it's approved in the next fiscal year budget. Obviously, although homicides are down, gun violence, of course, continues to be a serious concern, as do community engagement. So frankly, those things that you all were already working on seem of great importance to me. But like I said, there's no way that I know nearly as much about this as all of you all. So I would love to hear about your thoughts about where you guys want to go from here, whether you want to continue on in the vein you guys were already working on, if there are new things you want to do. Like I said, you guys are the experienced hands, and I'm only here because Kennedy didn't want to do it anymore and no one else raised their hand, so I jumped on the grenade. So with that, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts.
Kenny, do you want to start, or?
Well, I can, and I will say, you know, just being very straightforward, you know, just based on some of the recent developments around the flock safety, I do think that is one that, you know, should stay on this particular subcommittee's radar. It will continue to be a, I guess, hot button, sensitive, controversial even area of concern for the citizens here in Lexington. I do know there's been some commentary in the Lexington Herald from an opinion piece that was in the Lexington Herald maybe a month ago. Not sure how much traction that got, but it was quite eye-opening to continue to hear, you know, some of the pushback on the flock safety. I do know Chief Weathers, you know, sort of his response was it's not the boogeyman, which, you know, and I quote, because I'm not just, that was, I think, in a subsequent article around flock safety and, of course, the whole process with the council. So I'll start there, and I don't know, Phil, if you want to jump in with something else.
Yeah, I think that, Zach, just so you know, as part of last year, we did request from the police department to go through a presentation with us to let us know how the flock camera and view system works. The time that Kennedy and I went, Whitaker was there as well, and we went through the presentation. And I think all in all, we were all very well informed on how the program works. We did see, I believe we went to the presentation about a week after, or no, actually it was less than that. It was just a couple of days after they had done the press conference to announce it. And when we saw the number of people and businesses that opted into the system versus over those couple of days, it was quite a huge jump. All the businesses and all of the residents that jumped into the program. And I think all three of us got a much better understanding of how the camera system works, what it does. And we had some good conversation afterwards about how it wasn't what we all thought it was. So, which is a positive. So the three of us came out of it with some really good information, feeling much better about the program. And yeah, so I think that we're good. I mean, Kennedy, if you want to chime in on your thoughts, since you were there as well.
One question I think we had coming out of it, or subsequent to our visit at the Intelligence Center, number one, I would recommend another visit. I would be happy to go for a second visit, just to kind of get, it kind of addresses the question that I have now, and that was, we asked a question about 2.0. You know, typically when you, and I use the analogy of like an Apple iPhone, you know, you started with version 1, now you're to all the way to version 15. So what is Flock 2.0 or Fusus 2.0 look like? What would this evolve into if they continue to add additional cameras? If the system has modifications, you know, what type of, I guess, in terms of advancements, Does it go beyond what it is designed to do, which is provide, I guess, safety? I think the question is, is it safety or is it surveillance? So what does 2.0, 3.0 look like? So that's my reason for maybe wanting to go back and visit the Intelligence Center again, go through the process again, even if it is a repeat. But just want to, I think it would be in this subcommittee's best interest to just maintain a vigilance over what it continues to advance to be as they add cameras and potentially have modifications to the system.
And I think Whit and I concurred with Kennedy about the fact that maybe what we should do is that we should ask for like an annual or biannual update or meeting with them just to see how the program is going, how many crimes has it solved, what are the results of having the cameras that would also be in case they ask to increase the number of cameras and such, and the participation. So we haven't had a new. I don't think we. Yeah, after that first one, we haven't had a follow up with them yet.
So I guess two categories of comments. When this subcommittee started, I will take the blame. I essentially raised Kennedy's hand for him and said he will be the chair. So I'm thankful for the time that he served, because we really didn't know what the committees were supposed to be doing, right? And I think one of the things that Phil just said is really indicative of where we kind of landed as a group in terms of where we need to go, which is we just didn't know, right? And we needed to figure it out. As I mentioned to you right before the meeting started, I was assigned through city government to law enforcement to manage their compliance and accreditation. The position was not new, but having someone outside of the division, outside of the department, to come in with research background in policy measurement and compliance was important for city council when I took it to build the internal system. And I say that because I think one of the things that was most important about our conversation around Flock is what were we hearing out in the community for what people thought it was doing, what was being reported in terms of what it was doing versus what it actually was, right? And what its intent actually was to do and how the system could be used, right? Chief Weathers and several assistant chiefs and commanders even came and met with the larger commission group about it to kind of walk us through it and have that conversation. But it really wasn't until we got into our subcommittee meetings where we could really understand what it was trying to do, right? Because in those moments, like any large space conversation, when the question is asked, well, this came about as part of a research pilot, and then somebody says, well, what are the guiding purposes of the research? And Chief Weather says, well, we don't actually know the research questions. We're just part of the implementation phase. And I'm like, you can't do that. You can't make the community feel good about it and not be able to comment on the full scope of the work. But that is what we then tried to do by setting up those meetings to go and learn more, right? That is our obligation as the subcommittee for this, as part of the larger commission, is to make sure we're not just hearing one side, that we're getting voices and input from both sides. And so I think in terms of where we need to go, I would say we need to continue to do that. We need to continue to listen, to be able to know what is the right, or what is a conversation we should be having from a law enforcement perspective, what are topics of concern that are coming out of the community. But what we haven't done is asked law enforcement how we can support them, right? Can we, similar to our conversation in the larger commission meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, are there community forums that they're already hosting, right? They have a whole community unit, right? What are they doing? How can we support what they're doing? Where are they talking about this? block or anything else that's of important interest to the community? How can we help raise awareness about those meetings? Or are those things that we should show up in too? Just like we talked about, do we need to have our own, or can we join something else? Maybe we need to be present where they're talking to the community to be able to listen to both sides in those spaces as well. So from a, where are we going? How do we move forward? That would be my perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, all of you, for putting that all forward for me. And I think that it makes sense then to maybe organize another RTIC visit and maybe also reach out to, I don't remember, I've interacted with them before, but I don't remember who the community relations people are. Are those like the same people who do some of the, is that like Kristen Klingshirn and those other people out of the chief's office? Is that right? I can figure out.
They've got a unit. It's not like Shannon Gehafer and PAL or the Alumni Association. It's not those folks, but there are community officers that are assigned. You know, it's been 5 years now. Or 6 years now since I've worked there, but before, the specifically assigned community engagement officers reported to the commander in the chief's office. So I don't know if that structure still applies, but those folks would be important to talk to.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing, what I'd propose on at least these issues would be, I'm happy to reach out to whoever at RTIC, get either your contact, Kennedy, or people that either I know or can eventually get to, and set up a field trip, for lack of a better word, where we go back over presentation, talk about what's coming up. How recent was y'all's last visit?
Director Brown, I think
about a year ago now.
About a year ago. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then in that case, the timing might be perfect. And I mean, in my mind, I think maybe we even, I mean, you know, depending on everyone's schedules and what they can do, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't try to do that before the July meeting, if that's possible.
Chair Dembo, according to my notes, if this is correct, it was around August the 24th.
Okay, yeah.
Was the actual date of the visit. And believe me, having a revisit before that July meeting is definitely something I will be in favor of.
Perfect. So I'll try to figure that out. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Serenity.
I was just gonna say, we also invited the larger commission if they wanted to go, just for more context. And since we have had so much turnover, it might be good just to consider inviting the larger group again as well.
Perfect. And did that constitute like a special meeting as well that was somehow public, or is that just fact finding that we go out and do whatever, Director Brown?
We wouldn't be able to have more than 7 attend at a time.
7 commissioners?
Yes.
Okay.
Because then it would be considered you know, you all would have a quorum and folks would be kind of,
Love that open record stuff. So that doesn't include LPD though, just 7 of us. Okay. And is that something, can I just go ahead and reach out and do that stuff, or do I need to do anything through you or the mayor's office?
So I will contact Chief Maynard to get it scheduled.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And I'll copy you. I'll copy this committee on the email, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess the only other thing is, and again, I'm happy, I don't want to put work on you, but also I don't know what my role is. With regard to Serenity's suggestion about the community relations unit, I'd propose maybe they could be guests at either a next subcommittee meeting, or we could have a separate meeting with them outside of the subcommittee. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think that some of the members of that, of at least the community relations side of things from the police side, they were there in attendance when Kennedy and Witt and I were going through the presentation. And we start talking to them individually to like because there was a whole team of them there. So we just start talking to various members, and they actually have been wanting to do more community meetings to kind of let people know what's going on, update things like that. And that is one of the recommendations that I believe we made to the mayor's office. And they're willing to do it. And one of the things that we had talked about, I think, in one of our subcommittee meetings was to help with that community relations portion of it by maybe asking Christian Adair, who's a commissioner on the Racial Justice and Equity Commission, as well as the executive director of the Lyric, to maybe host something at the Lyric. So it's a comfortable space, someone that they all trust, and then we come in and we let them know who we are, what we're doing, and it's kind of like an education piece for the community as well, to let them know the faces of who's on this law enforcement subcommittee, that they can come talk to us. Here's our contact information. And if you have concerns, we can bring it up either at the larger commission meetings or the subcommittee meetings to try to help bridge that gap and build that trust and relationship there.
So, Phil, if I'm understanding you right, that was something that was discussed as a possibility, but it was still in notional. Nothing, no plans came forward for that. Maybe it makes sense to, again, like you did before, kill two birds with one stone and see if we can also get members of the community relations unit to, again, come to this field trip. And we can also have a more formal discussion with them. I don't know what you guys think about that versus having a separate meeting. I'm open to whatever, but I'd just throw that out there to the group.
I would suggest separate.
Okay.
Just because they go over a lot of information in their real-time intelligence unit, and it could eat up a lot of time.
Okay, that's no problem. So maybe again, I might trouble you, Director Brown, to see if we could set up a separate meeting with the community relations unit, and we'll figure out a time that works for as many of us as possible. And then I think there, Phil, both to forward what Serenity was suggesting in terms of what else can we do to help, and it may be that if they're still on board, we can go ahead and set that up. That could be one of these community outreach events that we were kind of talking about in the whole commission. Okay, well, that all sounds great. Any other things about the flock issue before we move on to the other? I mean, that's kind of the third, I think, issue we've started touching on, which is the community relations issue. And then I know another thing that you guys had talked about and made recommendations regarding was gun violence. And I'd be happy to hear people's thoughts on that and what you guys did before, and if there were ongoing projects.
With gun violence, basically, we sort of tapped into One Lexington and Divine Karama and his team. That was kind of our, go-to when it came to addressing that particular area. So I do think, once again, just at a high level, it would be in the subcommittee's best interest to, circle back and see about updates from his team, him and his team. I do know statistically, there's been quite a turn, but obviously gun violence continues to be a problem here in the city.
Okay, sounds good. Once again, we could ask Divine and anyone else from One Lexington to come to a subcommittee, or we could set up a separate meeting. I'm happy to do whatever you all think is best. Any thoughts on preferred venue?
I will say it did kind of fall off the radar for me. I've never visited his office, directly. And I do know there was some conversation about visiting him and his team, as opposed to the opposite of him coming into one of our meetings. I just wanted to kind of see the setup, and also maybe introduce and greet some of his staff there with One Lexington.
Have you been down here in our office, Mr. Wells?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just a big room with cubicles. We're all in the same office. There's
Uh,
no,
Okay, yeah.
there's no
I-
fancy
I've
setup.
never,
They
I've
sit
never
right
had the
across from
occasion
me.
to go there. I just go straight to the caucus room and
Oh,
then
okay.
after it's over, I leave.
Yeah, there's no fancy setup. Our
Okay.
office is really not conducive for meetings just because it's on the first floor. Big, used to be like formal banquet space that we've
Okay.
turned into an office.
Okay,
But
well, that answers that question, but I guess we
but
can
feel
figure
free
out a
to,
way
we can have him come
to meet
to.
with his team at least.
Mhm.
Were you gonna say, Director Brown, that
Yeah, I
have him come
can,
to one of the subcommittees?
I can invite them to the next subcommittee meeting, if that works for you all.
Yeah, that's fine by me as long as other people, I want to be sensitive to people's time. Like, I'll go to as many special meetings as you guys want, but at the same time, if we're already meeting,
Okay. We got a lot
July
of
meeting
special
works for
meetings.
me.
Okay.
So I mean, that already hits three of the things, but I guess the question is, are there other larger goals or larger issues that you guys, I mean, one of the things I'll say is, I think our committee is probably, a subcommittee is going to get, I mean, I'm sure they're all going to get a lot of input, but I think we'll get a lot of input from any of these public forums that we were discussing in the larger commissions. So obviously, I think whenever those happen, we will be active participants, and that will no doubt guide what we do in subsequent subcommittee meetings. So some of it's kind of, let's wait and see what they say and, get some info. But you guys have been toiling at this far longer than I have. So I guess the question is there anything left over from previous meetings, previous input that you guys had kind of said, well, this is another thing I'd like to address. This is another issue that I think we could add value in that we haven't discussed, and maybe we hit them all, but I just want to make sure I'm asking.
I'm not a commissioner, but I will offer this again to this subcommittee, especially as it relates to flock and other policies that you all may be interested in the future, whether it's community engagement or whatever that is as it relates to law enforcement and accountability, is that I think, and this is me as just my professional and having worked in this space in another county, I think it would be prudent for there to be another body such as this committee or subcommittee to review any changes that happen with like the flock system prior to them being implemented, so that it can not so that you can co-sign or or be some accountability measure, but this is an important issue for our community and for government. And I think if we're going to be on top of any change that may happen in the future, it would be important that before those changes are made, that LPD comes to this body to present them prior to, and then they can get input from others who are looking at this from a racial equity lens.
Yeah, I don't remember us talking about that before, but I support this. I support this idea. Again, my perspective is very different than most people, right? There are very few civilians who really get to know the law enforcement department inside and out, right? And that truly what is allowed and what isn't allowed and what are the processes, right? I think there's a lot of assumptions that float around in the community about how things happen. But I do like this idea. Again, I think it's important what Director Brown is saying, not from a watchdog or approval perspective, but perspective matters. And when we think about how we communicate changes and how we talk about things, right? Even when they came to us and said, yeah, but we've presented to at every council meeting, it's the council person's responsibility to go out in the community. And I was like, that's not it, right? So I just think it would help. And I think even when we communicate this back, we should be mindful about not maybe necessarily saying they need our input. It's because they need our input, but just for us to help them with a community perspective for how we communicate about the changes, so that we can support and partner with them for best outcomes, right?
Director Brown, is there something official or formal that we need to do in order to request that?
You're on mute.
That would be a recommendation.
And then would that be an action? Would it be the mayor's office, or would the council have to approve that? You'll have to excuse my ignorance.
So the recommendations that this commission makes are to the mayor, administration. And
Yes.
I think I do believe, because it's something that's very local. I think that would be something that she could get on board with. And let me go back and say this. We have this new report, right? It has not yet been published because there's a lot of edits that need to happen, specifically edits around what is local. This is a local commission, and the amount of data that was presented from a national standpoint is just not at all what the mayor would like to see. She commended this subcommittee because it was done right. And it specifically spoke to Lexington, Fayette County, not from a national perspective. And Lexington, though we know the history of policing across this country, Lexington in some cases is an anomaly. So she thought it was that this subcommittee report was pretty good. And I'll send that to you, Zach, because I don't think you've seen it.
I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Kudos to Kennedy for that.
Yeah, me and my alter ego. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express that night, so it worked out. One thing I wanted to chime in on, and Dr. Wright, not to put you on the spot, but this is something that I continue to struggle with, is because you just used the word watchdog, and you used it just in the course of your commentary. We can't be watchdogs, right? And I always struggle with that, because from what Director Brown is saying is that, we should put that in the form of a recommendation. So we can put that in the form of a recommendation, but me and my, sort of the way I'm wired is action as opposed to recommendation. So it's ironic that you would use the term watchdog, because I totally agree. And I do want to put that on the record in terms of recommendations that lead to accountability. True accountability, because I do think there are a lot of steps that are taken within the community that are not necessarily funneled through community engagement. That should be on the front side proactively, as opposed to coming back in the newspaper and saying it's not the boogeyman. And you can maybe dispel a lot of those things on the front side, as opposed to waiting to try to react to it on the backside. I'm sort of noting that. I'm noting that for Chair Dimbo. So the newly anointed Chair Dimbo.
Again, for me, it comes down to language, right? And I think relationships in general, but especially with law enforcement, have struggled with the community because of use of language, right? They operate in one language system that is not necessarily the community vernacular that they're using, right? So when a term is used or a phrase is used, nobody stops to make sure everybody understands or that we're all talking about the same thing. And instead, what we do is we all walk out with our separate now biased opinions of what happened because of the lenses that we brought and the different language that we used. You know, however we make that recommendation, you know, we want the language to be supportive, right? But the action item, to Kennedy's point, the action item is about accountability. But what we're trying to do is be a partner and be supportive to provide better outcomes here. I was going to say support again, so I was trying to work through a different word in my head.
Well, and kind of what I'm hearing from you, Serenity, and everyone here is that some of the value that we can bring is just the expressive value of being that bridge between the input we're getting on either end, right? Like that story you told me about the community relations being like, well, we've told all the council people or whatever. I feel like that is like quintessential government in that we're all looking around, and I'm speaking as a longtime government employee, we're all looking around to be like, you know, how do we get in touch with the people that we're serving? And the people who we're serving sometimes are all like, how the heck do I get anyone to listen to me? And I think that's a good way that we can add value by, exactly as you say, translating that language to make sure that what the police department says, for example, and what the community says, they're actually talking to each other in ways that connect. So I really like that. And also, I like Kennedy's idea of just, and sort of everyone's idea of just, we'll just put recommendations in to make us not a watchdog per se, but someone who can invest the time and expertise to do that. So, I mean, it sounds like, and we can talk about it later when it's closer to the recommendation time for whenever we're doing the report, which is October. Is that right? Is that when we've got to do it by?
That's yes. So that's when it needs to be.
Well, it sounds like we've already, thanks to a non-commissioner but concerned citizen who knows a lot and a you know, and public servant, basically I'm in favor of a recommendation along the lines you guys are saying, which would be not consent, but certainly notice of any change to the flock camera system, right? And we can do it, and we can word it in a way that, again, doesn't suggest that we are overseeing or judging or looking to weigh in, but to make sure that we're kept abreast of it so that then we can appropriately, like you said, communicate it out and be an ally to both sides in whatever way we can. Yeah.
And you all may have some ideas on how they can share the information outside of it just being council. Which again, you know, that I think that's a value that this commission brings to the community.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's a great one. Any other things that we haven't touched on or ideas that you all wanted to bring up? Okay. So, seeing none, I mean, I don't think we have to go for a full hour. You know, I guess the action points, we'll figure out when we can do that meeting with the RTIC. We'll figure out when we can do the meeting with community relations. We will ask one Lex and Divine and anyone else that's relevant to come to the next subcommittee meeting. And we've already got one recommendation set already, and we'll come up with some others. But otherwise, like I said, I'm honored to be serving with you all. I really appreciate all your input. There's a lot I have to learn from all the work you guys have already done and all of your expertise, and I really look forward to doing that with you guys. Any concluding thoughts before we jump off? Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you all. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll probably see you guys whenever we are able to meet in person for a field trip. See y'all out here.